Hello and welcome. I'm Srinivasan and this is Talking Sense with Srini. As elections in Tamil Nadu heats up, the DMK is firing on all cylinders to build its case to the voters. At the very center of its campaign is a familiar pitch, the Dravidian Model, which the party credits for the state's strides in education, industrial growth, and welfare delivery. Tamil Nadu is also aiming to become a $1 trillion economy by 2030. It boasts some of the country's strongest human development indicators. Yet, it is also grappling with a debt burden exceeding 8 lakh crore rupees, a widening income gap, and a startup ecosystem that still trails neighboring city of Bengaluru. So, what does the Dravidian model deliver and what it leaves unfinished? Joining us to decode this is our editor-in-chief, Srinivasan, and alongside with him is also somebody who has done a rigorous academic study on this model, is Mr. Kalaiarasan. Let me begin with Srinivasan sir first. I asked Dr. PTR a couple of years back when I interviewed him on what exactly is a Dravidian model. Let me quote, what he said. He said, when my driver's son goes to the same school where my son goes, being a child of privilege, then I have a successful outcome of this model. I think there's still a long way to go for the DMK to reach there. But what's your perspective on this? Do you think it's an economic strategy, or is it just about ideology, or you think it's more of a branding move by the DMK?
I think the Dravidian model, which is known in the popular context, has several elements in it. It's not one. It's also political. It's also social. It's also economy. Lots of things combined together is what they are calling it as a Dravidian model. What is essentially he started with the Justice Party and all its initial discussions on these issues is social equality. That's one major factor, which actually was implemented. Tamil Nadu is one of the earliest states to implement reservation. So obviously, so that reservation in education, jobs, and other things, so that people could be pulled up, and then the society's development becomes more equitable. That is one. The second aspect is, looking at social issues like, the early ones. You must have heard a lot of stuff, which is now all over, midday meal schemes, which is to ensure that those kind of things happen. And there are other things like education, health, it reaches all sections. The other factor to this is also about, how the governance is done, how these deliveries are done. And then you see various outcomes. For instance, human, HDI index, Human Development Index, Tamil Nadu is one of the highest.
That's right, yeah.
And that again is one of the, in part of the Dravidian model integrated to that is. Then again, industrial promotion, what kind of industries to be promoted, and so that is also integrated into this. And finally, when I was telling you about governance, also the center-state relation, that emphasizing more on, the federal issues. This whole aspect of one-size-fits-all solution is not the way to go forward. Each state is different, and especially Tamil Nadu has its own, cultural, linguistic specialities, and it must be adjusted to that. So what they actually tried to picture as the Dravidian model is a combination of a whole lot of these things, and that is what I think they tend to represent. And what PTR told you is perhaps the most popular version of what he wanted to convey, a quick one.
Okay, let me bring in, Mr. Kalaiarasan as well here. Indian economics is kind of divided between two people, Amartya Sen and Jagdish Bhagwati. And you seem to have struck a balance through your Dravidian model, the book that you said, along with Mr. Vijay Bhaskar there. Tell me, what's the distinct thing about Tamil Nadu, vis-a-vis Kerala and Gujarat?
I think if you go back to the debate, or the debate that you mentioned of Amartya Sen and Jagdish Bhagwati. What was the debate? The debate was essentially India cannot be understood. India's growth and development cannot be understood in a singular frame. It has to be understood via its regions, because there's a huge disparity among the regions in the way in which the growth takes place in those regions. Jagdish Bhagwati in around 2013 came out with an idea. For India's development, let's work on the growth, growth indicators. This will automatically take into account of the development. You don't have to worry about, of education, health, or others separately. First, do the growth. generate revenue, and that automatically actually translates to rising tide, lifts all boat, kind of trickle down approach. That's actually premise. And they also gave some example of Gujarat. In contrast to that, Professor Sen and John Race came out with a book based on the Kerala model, tracking the Kerala's history, said that look, growth not necessarily translate into development in terms of well-being. You need to have a intervention, direct intervention in health, education, and poverty and other aspects, particularly on the global, so not only from India and other part of the world. They said the growth doesn't translate into, you need to actually put a thing, in fact, first focus on the development. But in that context, I actually I was doing my PhD thesis in JNU, the debate was in peak. So then, it's also understanding. With this, I came out with an argument that, look, you don't have to see as a sequential, like first growth versus development. You can actually do a simultaneous intervention, which is you also do a focus on growth and also invest in your education, health, and welfare, and etc. So therefore, you get a model where you get a simultaneous intervention in the growth and development, which makes growth possible, and also growth is more inclusive. And how that you actually measure, if you look at carefully India's Tamil Nadu development model, it clearly has a two distinct characteristics from Gujarat and Kerala and other states. What are those two distinct characteristics? One, definitely, as I mentioned earlier, it's a growth with development. In that sense, you have a relatively better manufacturing base in this state, and you have a relatively better other service sector, even high-end service sector base. Tamil Nadu share in most of these indicators in terms of growth is much better. Definitely in some indicators we can think of Gujarat better, but most of the indicators in growth, Tamil Nadu actually does fairly well. But on top of that, it also does extremely well with the respect to development. Development, I mean, you take any indicators of education, health, poverty, and levels as well as the rate of change over a period of time. Some of these indicators, Tamil Nadu was almost equivalent to the most of the poorest states in the 60s. And thanks to the successive intervention of the Dravidian parties, have actually made this growth and this development possible. I also give one more extension of this. How the growth itself, what is the mechanism, what are the process under which this actually takes place? Just to nuts and bolts of the growth drivers. See, you will find any state you travel, I'm sure you would have traveled, say, Maharashtra or Gujarat or even Karnataka. Probably one state you would find the economic clusters spread out across state. If you look at there's an index, one can calculate spatial index, the distribution of enterprises, the distribution of enterprises via blocks or districts, you will find here it's across broad-based. Despite there's a big growth poles like Chennai around, then there's a Coimbatore cluster, western and the north. Cluster. But having said that, you also have a very little broad base, especially, Virudunagar you can find, Madurai you can find, even part of Trichy you can find indicators, which you do not find in Gujarat, for instance, except the few growth districts. Similarly, in Maharashtra, either Pune or Bombay clusters. You don't find in the Vidarbha and other backward regions. So something you can think of. Second, it is also the state where you see social inclusion, which is a key, as Srinivasan mentioned. It is also partly historical intervention. It has historical legacy. Tamil Nadu is it's also documented in the recent book by Arvind Subramaniam, that is a few states where the state made early investment in education. And that education also made possible for everyone. It made inclusive, and then the set of affirmative action policy, not just affirmative in terms of caste, but there are other ways in which the inclusion was done. So both early investment in education and also the inclusive education to some extent. So that both played a role of when this growth takes place, the people also would participate in that growth. So it is that way one would call as a virtuous path of growth. It did not happen in one day. It actually happened at the different spaces. We can actually discuss as to what intervention at which point we understand.
Okay, so since you brought the topic of cluster-based approach in Tamil Nadu, I want to ask you this. We understand the different clusters and all that, but with the advent of AI, isn't that the very threat? There's a certain amount of servicitization of manufacturing. We discussed in our last episode, I think with you, during the budget season, I believe. And even if you look at the budget there, this year, and you yet to see lots of revenues coming in from the high-end manufacturing. Do you think Tamil Nadu would be able to create that jobs at scale with a similar cluster-based approach?
Yeah, again, this is again a challenging question. Also, let's track again. Let's look at the history. Where does Tamil Nadu stand with respect to what you call as a manufacturing, or otherwise economics called non-farm employment, which in economics parlance, structural transformation. Basically, moving from low productive agriculture or other low productive activity to manufacturing or industry or service. That's a root of development. Historically, any country, if you take Europe to North America to any countries, even South Korea recent or China, for instance. So Tamil Nadu definitely has followed that path. I mean, if one state, the few states, you can also think of Maharashtra to some extent, Karnataka to some extent. The few states which actually follows that path of structural transformation, which essentially means moving away taking workforce away from the low productive sector to the high productive sector, which is basically manufacturing and industry. How that happened here is again the two levels of process. One is this cluster-based low-end manufacturing, and this big factory-driven growth, which is like you see in Chennai around a lot of automobile sectors, now recently electronic sectors, and also in Coimbatore you'll find cluster as well as the big factory. So it is, I would say, socially embedded, broad-based, localized industries, and the mobile big investment, which includes domestic investment big level and also the foreign investment that coming. So both this simultaneously happen in the state. And I would also say historically there was an interaction between these big firms of mobile in nature, foreign investment, all of that, and also of the small cluster-based. So for example, where would your accelerators come from? Say you have a factory, automobile factory in Chennai. Earlier, the Korean company, when the Hyundai came, some of the Hyundai, their own subsidiaries were the suppliers to the Hyundai. But later, those subsidiaries also actually sourced the inputs from the local industries.
That's right.
So there was an engagement or kind of
ecosystem is being created.
interaction between the big firms, even if the big firms coming from outside, and the local firms. How does this help of the local firms? It's two-way. This is how the growth or development takes place. One, you get a technology. You get what you call know-how skills. There's a learning in the process of engagement. So that's been the state trajectory. That's why it could build that I would call as a productive capacity over a period of time, even when the industry shifts takes place. For example, it's now from automobile to electronics. How this transition, how the state actually manages transition is partly because you build this ecosystem, and therefore you also facilitate, actively work out with, therefore you can have this transition. So that precisely the way in which that shift took place. With respect to now, AI, will it actually make, obviously AI, we do not know, not only here, anywhere in the world, we do not know what level the AI going to replace the labor. What are the ways in which AI is going to influence your manufacturing activity? Obviously, it is a serious concern. If you carefully follow the MIT economist Asameglu and others, there's a fantastic book called Power and Progress, and where they articulate that the AI technology is not any other technology in the history of economic development. This is distinctly different in terms of this has a huge potential of the disruption. So how the disruption going to take place, we need to carefully study before make that assessment. Definitely this is a challenge that we need to engage with.
You spoke about the achievements of the state, both growth and development there. But if you really look at it, it has happened over the years. There's a decades of history to it. From the Justice Party to Kamaraj to Arinya Ranna to M. Karunanidhi and M. G. Ramachandran, and now to M. K. Stalin there. You think one particular government can claim the entire credits for it?
No, of course not. You see, right at the beginning, after independence, when the Madras presidency was there, and Kamarajar was the chief minister continuously for about 9 years. So he did start the midday meal scheme. He was the one also, the rice, subsidized rice scheme. Even that was started then. Now, his idea at that time was, ensure enrollment of students. So he thought that, there could be a lot of village schools, government schools which are in, districts and other smaller places. And if you mix it with, if students are offered midday meal, that will ensure certain attendance. And that's how the enrollment began to pick up. So it reached a certain stage. I think after that, when Anna took over, and he became the first chief minister of Tamil Nadu, in the sense when it was re-christianed from Madras state in 1969 onwards. And he took that forward because it blended very well with the social equity and the social movement which Justice Party had begun. It blended well with that. So They continued with that. Unlike other political parties who would have cynically rejected it, the good thing which happened here was they kind of co-opted and then made it part of the Dravidian model, and it is now as known as more as a Dravidian model. So they included that as part of that, further improved it, and added many more elements to that, and that's how it was taken forward. And during MGR's period, he extended it to higher education, and that's where he brought in the participation of private sector. That's a question I think I would like to ask him later. That's the other development which took place. But then now, when Stalin took over, he brought in the morning breakfast scheme, which so the children could get breakfast in the morning and lunch in the afternoon. Now the emphasis is more on nutrition, that per child how much nutrition he gets and how much is required. When the child goes to school early morning, his mind should be working, and if he is hungry, then obviously he is won't be able to comprehend what is going on. So it's important that, because children have higher metabolism, they need to quickly, they digest very quickly. So they need some food in the morning. So breakfast is a very important first meal for them. So he has introduced that, and he is talking about certain nutrition level. Ultimately, all this model, Dravidian model, what we are talking of, will the test of that is how well it is implemented. I think in that sense, the state have to have certain governance capacity, and that's what has, I think, the bureaucracy here managed to do that. So a combination of all this perhaps is given, and what is they call as a Dravidian model. This is all what it is, and during election time, they're saying it because these are the things they want to show, because the outcome of all this is also in the form of, like I said earlier, the HDI indicators. It did. But the question is, has this evenly spread? Has all the subaltern kind of communities, have they all been able to part of this? Have they all been lifted together? Are we seeing a more equitable distribution of all this? I mean, those are the questions which is, I think, still wide open. And then again, the question of how much of the private sector, I mean, I would like to ask these two, how they have managed to expand it. Because one thing the state certainly did here by bringing in these programs is to ensure there is no over-domination of private sector, and that may take the wealth away for social sector developments. And that they very consciously did, I think. But then whether these two areas are still remain. I mean, all communities did not, are not part of this.
See, actually, yeah, we'll have to little again go back to little foundational stuff. What we mean by, you asked that we've been taking the Dravidian model. Essentially, it means, if you look at the literature, why state generally, not just in Tamil Nadu, if globally in India, India is seen as a state in country, in many states you can find, exception Tamil Nadu and Kerala, that why India underfunds is social sector, given its per capita income. It's a fact. It's for compared to any other. Even today, why China is able to build that level of productive capacity. India's per capita income almost similar in early 80s. And today, China's per capita income 7 times of India. And China's today, in terms of take a foreign reserve, in terms of share of the world trade, or even manufacturing capacity, it's a world manufacturing house today. So how did China build? One essential component of building any manufacturing or any productive capacity or development is the education. Education does both of what you call instrumental role of building capacity, general well-being of individual. So that actually was taken care in the state much earlier than many other states, which I mentioned as earlier that, it was early state putting investment in school education, thanks to intervention of the leadership from Justice Party onwards. Of course, later Kamaraj, then later DMK, and parties, followed almost. Then I also must say, as Mr. Srinivasan mentioned, is also the fact that the party, when the changes, of course, in Tamil Nadu, you always see the regimes changing one after other. But you see the certain policies, remarkable continuity. You cannot take a break from that with respect to certain social and economic policy. Remarkable continuity, I would say, is also partly because of the electoral compulsion, or the political parties are vigilant of making sure that the ruling party doesn't compromise certain basics, which is something that the state is known for. So this intervention actually continued. With respect to of whether everybody benefited, is there any left? So of course, any mobilization in the history, you will always find some group actually benefits at the expense of others, which is a natural process. But whether state is active or cognizant enough to understand that there is an emerging inequality within groups, among the groups, that some actually benefit or others, I think there has been attempt. I would think of course, one can question the limits of those attempts, of success of those attempts, that the state has been able to here understand the dynamics. Particularly, that's how you try to rework even reservation policies such that it actually percolates to the last left out groups, whatever that is available in terms of access to education, access to jobs in the public sector. With respect to private sector, again, when the Tamil Nadu introduced certain privatization measures in health sector, because Tamil Nadu is also known of the corporate, known of the health tourism. If you see, if you go to Vellore and other pockets, you'll find huge population moving from, say, Bengal and even Bangladesh coming to India, partly to exploit, partly to avoid this health tourism provided by the private sector. So many think that therefore this become not accessible to many, and therefore generates new inclusion, which is partly true. But more importantly, the state has also been actively pushing public sector in health. It has not compromised. If you look at the number of hospitals in terms of ratios, and both in absolute numbers and the ratios, it has not been. Even if you take the per capita expert, there is a measure, the economist uses measure, how much household spends on health in sectors. Of course, Tamil Nadu has been able to reduce that particular out-of-pocket expenditure because of the state intervention in terms of drug provision, in terms of public sector intervention. It's been able to reduce that burden on the households, which is partly because of this inherited intervention. So here you have a private sector that did not compromise or did not replace the public sector. In fact, works, I would say, complement in that way, of particularly on health. Of course, there are other areas one can think, one can think, it can be built different way, more desirable way, more inclusive way. One can think, one can have a debate. But as of now, it has not replaced as one would think. In fact, it has been simultaneously working better in that sense.
Yeah. So one thing I would like to say here, very interesting in Tamil Nadu is, in political rhetoric, they will always keep attacking private sector. They will say Taniyar Mayam. They will keep saying it, and they would always favor public sector, and that they would continue in their political discourse. But I think it's very tactical in nature. They do privately support private sector and then publicly make this statement, like politicians always do. They have a different approach to this. So the private sector has been given its due, but not the cost of public sector. That's what Kalai is.
No, I can even provide numbers. Even recently I've calculated, because I've done a chapter for a Tamil Nadu economic survey. We actually mapped today what is the size of private sectors in manufacturing, which is something a data set's available. So the annual survey of industry, which provides you all enterprises located within the state. We try to compare with a bunch of states, including Kerala, Gujarat, and other states. Tamil Nadu actually one of the highest share. It has highest share in public sector. So it hasn't compromised, although we see everywhere private factories, but it doesn't come down that way. So it's just a question to ask whether we build a new factories of the public sector. It's not the case globally, right? Since 91, what is the driver of investment? The driver of investment since 90s, not just in India, globally, it's a private investment. So you'll have to maintain a policy, industrial policy, such that you don't lose that private investment, and yet you maintain your character of your inclusion, of public sector nature, all of that. So you'll have to do a very delicate balance of, while maintaining the attracting private investment, at the same time maintaining the inclusive character of the growth. That's what actually challenge for the state.
The lot of growth that Tamil Nadu has achieved has come from the welfare spending that he has done. While the critics call it Revdi culture, freebies and all that, where do you actually draw the line?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because this word Revdi has been brought in by Prime Minister during one of his political rallies.
That's right.
But it's not that he himself is averse to that.
I know, Ladki Bahin, Ladli Behna and all that.
Yeah, so a whole lot of... but there are Revdis and Revdis. Let me put it that way. Not all Revdis are bad and not all Revdis are good. So what has Tamil Nadu done? Tamil Nadu has been a pioneer in this. It's not just pioneer in social improvement, like I said, affirmative action and all those things. It started from here. It came much later to North after VP Singh came. Much of that came later. But what they did was they combined with some kind of a welfareism. Like earlier I said, it was, midday meal scheme, free rice. So people said, look, you're making people lazy. You're not trying to teach them how to fish, but you're giving them all free, and therefore it's a state of freebies, and therefore nothing is. See, certainly populism is something which is followed by both DMK and AIDMK. There's no difference between the two. Now, it comes, bad Dravidis, perhaps when they start giving television sets and saying, I'll give you free connections, or they give you things like, say a grinder mixer, which happened in the past. So those were kind of, more, to attract, or anklets to women, those kind of things. But, there is other aspect to that which we should look. Not everything is Revdi. It has actually helped in improving the social. It was a component of the attempt being made here to lift the social structure of the state by ensuring social development. I'll give you one example: a free bus ride for women. Now, people could scoff at saying why they should be given free bus ride. Probably they take the ride and go to visit a relative and come back, or maybe they can have a good tour. That's not the way to look at it. Let's look at different way. Women participation in labor force in Tamil Nadu is one of the highest, and women do need certain mobility to go to workplace. And if there is a work available, they have to go to that workplace to start working. How do they do it if they don't have a transport? But if you give them a free transport, you encourage them to take a bus to go to the nearest place, work and come back, it's a beneficial to them. So I think that should be looked at as kind of a economic multiplier. The other thing which I would like to link with that is say the morning breakfast scheme. Now, when somebody goes to a factory to work early morning, the women worker leaves and she takes a free ride, leaves a child behind who has to go to school. She need not bother about fixing morning breakfast. I mean, it could be taken care of when the child goes to school, and if the child actually ensures that the child gets a morning breakfast, then the other issue of her is solved, and the child in any case will get a midday meal and she can come back later. I think all these things tie together. If not done in isolation, I think they are trying to fix this jigsaw puzzle one by one. And what Centre has certainly done is the Jan Dhan JAM scheme, a direct benefit transfer. So that DBT ensures that the money is delivered directly into the hands of. So if some money is given to women, it becomes cash in her hand. So that she can utilize the way she, of course, she wants. But then, of course, there are other things. Some husbands may take it away and then, while away by, going to nearest liquor shop and all those kind of things. These distortions will happen, and nobody denies it. But I still think that there is certain method in madness which Tamil Nadu is practicing by tying up all these together. But then, if the Revdi culture really has to be seen in other states, I think Kalai would be a better person to explain this, but it also depends on how much capacity the state has created.
The fiscal capability.
Yeah, whereas these things could be absorbed.
Fiscal capability of the state. Tamil Nadu's outstanding debt has crossed 8 lakh crore, about 28% of the GSTP, about the recommended 20% of the FRBM. Fiscal deficit has been breaching targets, but now I think it's under the FRBM's control of 3% for states. Revenue deficit is 1.6%. Is this model fiscally sustainable? There's also lots of barrage of welfare schemes that's been announced in the manifesto across all parties. That's where they get united there. So you think, can you keep spending like this, still chase a target like $1 trillion economy?
We'll discuss the sustainability of the fiscal deficit and debt. Before doing that, let's. I also want to say a few words on the populism, the freebies thing. I think if you again track the history of populism in the country, Tamil Nadu is one of the state actually the pioneer in doing it. When it introduced midday meal scheme, it's starting Justice Party, then Kamaraj, then MGR, then later now you see the breakfast schemes with the. And in fact, Kalaiarasan also extended that the basket of those goods. Similarly, if you can also think of PDS, the public distribution system, one of the vibrant system. In fact, that takes care of the greatest. If you see the the Gini coefficient is down in the state or poverty alleviation, lot of that actually transfer has taken place via PDS. PDS has been one of the, I would say, successful policies of the. So both of these policies, when were introduced in state, were seen by many economists and others as a wastage of money, dole, populism, all of this. What we see now as a contested terrain or even cry. You also saw that. You just take the newspaper in 80s or newspaper in 90s when some of these policies, same editorials were written then saying, of course, these are all not sustainable, wastage of money and all of that. But actually later, many of these policies became the national level policies. So much so, in fact, Supreme Court actually took a suo notice to say that, make this midday meals universal. Make at least the essential goods supplied via PDS. That's how even the Prime Minister scheme of food grain, right to food, actually came from the 2013 Act, came from the PDS success. So some of the policies which were otherwise seen as a populist, wastage of money, all of that actually became now essential part of our welfare state. And also you must remember that our constitution, although we say the welfare state, is many of the policies are put in the directive principles, not in fundamental right. Even education became the fundamental right very lately. So it is ability of the states innovatively create intervention or of safety net or the welfare, which actually become the welfare state act. The welfare state that we see now. So after particularly of the 90s of the Nervian planning, move from the planning to the market economy, it is the states which actually were successful in creating safety nets, successful in creating welfare interventions. Even take the NRG. NRG was implemented by Maharashtra in late 70s, which became a national policies. So in each of these interventions, state actually intervened. Many of them were seen as a populism. Why I'm making this, bringing this history back now for the debate is because this Revdi is seen as a very negative sense of the populism thing. It is in this country, given its deprivation, this is the one actually way which actually worked in benefiting the majority and also worked, in fact, complementing the growth. It is not really taken away. There's no counterfactual study to suggest that since instead of putting money here, had you put that money in the other lever, your growth would have been X number more and your welfare would have been Y number more. No, there's no counterfactual study to suggest that it is really. So therefore, one has to see case by case. If even one makes a case that really whether this populist policies intervention is correct. One. The second, whether the populism done here, even if say for example women participation, the scheme, free bus pass scheme for women here, and is it the same say if it being implemented in BR and other part? There's also you see a competitiveness in terms of some of these policies. Either cash transfer or bus schemes, all of that. But you must remember that even if you introduce a politician in every state, may not be successful the same way it has been successful here. Why I'm making it's not that Tamil Nadu is great, therefore I'm not saying. I'm saying very factual information here, which is as Mr. Srinivasan mentioned, there's other complementary activities in place. So what actually today, what makes women participation in labor market improved? One, supply condition. The economists actually divide that into a supply condition and the demand condition. What are the supply conditions? Supply condition, women should be educated. The probability of women getting into the higher education is much higher in the state. So you actually solved the first problem. The second, social norm. The ability of women to step out, even if for the schools or the higher education or in the labor market. You need to make some kind of law and governance rule of, some governance indicators relatively better. Then you take the burden, social burden of the domestic burden, which is actually of women getting locked into the kitchen. This is a major concern for a burden that is called domestic chores or the domestic, unpaid labor. So where you actually relieve them from, by providing essential goods at the home. So partly of those everyday, including the morning breakfast scheme, actually that relieves the woman role in the kitchen in the morning, allows them to number of hours allows them to participate in the labor markets. Then you have a demand side of the factories and opportunities outside. So if you really want to improve of the women participation in labor market, you need to do a simultaneous intervention so many sectors. But just doing one scheme of introducing introducing bus pass or introducing some cash transfer that many states are doing, it's not going to work. If you really want to, unless you do this, all the other things that makes this ecosystem possible for women. This is actually, therefore, populism has to be understood in a broader sense. It is seen actually always this come from of the negative, pejorative sense that I think we need to move away from that and understanding that how actually it works in complementing the growth process. Having said that, now question is the fiscal sustainability. Is it really Tamil Nadu is in crisis with respect to fiscal deficit and debt ratio? I would say it's a misnomer. It is a bluntly wrong. It bluntly, I would say, not you. I mean, of course, politically one can take a different debate, but I think factually speaking, it's a wrong debate to say that even to think of that it is. Why I say the fiscal deficit. First of all, before I have to make further disclaimer here, there is an accountant sense of fiscal deficit. There is an accountant sense of debt GDP ratio. There is an economic sense. It is a balance for the government budget. The budget need not to balance. In fact, having a fiscal deficit for some extent is good for the economy, provided it does not crowd out the private investment. In the sense, it does not take away the money that is available in the private sector. Similarly, for the debt GDP ratio, or having a debt is wrong. No, as long as you are able to generate revenue, which you can repay and generate growth, it's a good thing to have. It's a wrong, I would say, it's absolutely wrong way to think that, it's a commonsensical thing that we need to balance our budget. No, not necessarily. In fact, good to have. But provided how long? Can we have unlimited borrowing? Can we have unlimited debt? No, there is an institution which is called FRBM Act, Fiscal Responsibility Management Act, which clearly says that there's a limit that, 3% is a fiscal deficit upper end. You cannot go beyond. How did they arrive at the 3% is the number? That it's because globally they studied, this is the number which actually if you go beyond that, actually it becomes unsustainable. If you go beyond that number, you are actually taking away money from the private sector. That long run, the growth will become unsustainable. So as long as you are actually within that limit, in fact, it's good to have. So therefore, Tamil Nadu is not in that way any crisis. Even if you take the debt is today 26%. So it's not 26%. In fact, it's sustainable limit. But I also want to say one more thing, which is with the Tamil Nadu. When you understand Tamil Nadu, what is the debt GDP ratio of the poorer states or even the other states? Kerala, it's 37%. Even BR, it is much more, 38%.
In Japan, it's 100%.
So we can't go to that level. But therefore, we need to think what is a sustainability with bandwidth. Yeah. Is that Tamil Nadu lies within that sustainability bandwidth or essentially moving beyond that? That's one. I also want to say one more specific character of the Tamil Nadu fiscal status. It's also Tamil Nadu is one of the few states in India it's able to generate its own revenue. For example, I just give an indicator. Tamil Nadu expenditure, the government expenditure, almost 75% of the expenditure is funded by its own taxes. It only relies on 25% from the central transfer. So again, that is a dispute. Central state, how much the state gets or all that. But still, it's able to generate its own revenue. In fact, it's in a better fiscal condition of generating its own revenue. As compared to, if you take the BR, it's 75% of its revenue for expenditure come from the central transfer.
Yeah.
It is the other way around. So there it's difficult. But here, as long as you are able to generate your own revenue, as long as you are able to generate growth, you have 11% growth. I think it's fair enough to, because you are able to generate revenue, you are able to spend it. That's how actually you make a growth, make inclusive. But one may think instead of putting money here, you can put money in elsewhere else. That actually creates a better opportunity, that creates more inclusion. If someone says, that's I would engage with that debate. Otherwise, to make this claim of, like a false claim of, it's fiscally unsustainable, I think it's a misnomer.
One last question there to both of you. One thing that the Dravidian model has genuinely got it right that the other states in Delhi should adopt, and, one thing that urgently needs to be fixed. So, Srinivasan sir.
Yeah, I think the Dravidian model has got certainly one thing right, that there is a more balanced, formula for growth. They are trying to ensure growth, which is industry growth. On the same hand, they're also trying to ensure the social growth. And the two feed into each other and they are not in isolation. I think that is the thing, that's the thing they're trying to promote in Tamil Nadu. I think it has worked well for the state. And if, for instance, in Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal tried to improve the lot of schools by improving better infrastructure, better amenities in the schools so that learning becomes a better place. But then the outcomes also have to come. Also adjoining that, other things also have to happen. The children actually have to absorb and come with better education outcomes. So if you look at ASA report one after another, it's not just many parts of India are defaulting on that. So I think this one particular thing for Tamil Nadu has certainly worked well, and other could as well look at it.
And Kalaiarasan?
No, I think I would just complement that to say that simply this is probably is a few states, and one of the states I would say. I mean, some extent in better than in Kerala and growth, which could achieve both growth and development together, which has been the big debate in the country, that you can have a growth but not much development. In the sense, it doesn't percolate into improving education, health, poverty, social indicators. But here is a one state where it has achieved both of the relative growth and also of the better social interventions in development indicators.
So there are some examples which should be more this thing. For instance, Gujarat, it has got a lot of heavy industries, petrochemicals, energy, and it has come with the global, basically financial center. All these are really high end, But on the other hand, Tamil Nadu has a lot of MSMEs, SMEs, and which is actually given more employment to a whole lot of people, which he earlier referred to as cluster development. But it also has heavy industries. It's kind of a Detroit in a way of South, where it has got a lot of automobile companies here.
That's right, yeah.
And then when the centers program came for face manufacturing, again, Tamil Nadu could do better because it already had a base and it could use that scheme to benefit from that. And therefore, it could improve its electronics. And if you look at the cell phone manufacturing, both Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are doing wonderfully well. And there is another difference. If you have to compare with, say, Karnataka has got a better IT infrastructure, better IT industries, better service.
Better GCCs.
I would say.
Compared to Tamil Nadu.
So one can say this, there are certain sectors that the state should aspire to achieve. Of course, there are some states are doing better, particularly of the high-end GCC, high-end even service sector in
startups
as well. But this also again, I would think of this as two levels of intervention. One is we have done our first level of interventions, like a big quantitative indicators, higher better jobs. I mean, in the sense, relatively better jobs in industry and service sector, taking up people away from the low productive to higher productive. And, education, ensured access to education, ensured access to health, relatively lesser poverty. And I think probably in the state, if a kids actually join school, it'll end almost, probability of getting higher education is relatively, without break. It's great. I think no other state you would find. But you also have a new set of problems, which I called of it coming from its own success. What are those new set of challenges? Which is, as Sir mentioned, of the learning outcomes. So it is not enough to send children to schools or just higher education. It is also equally important what skills they acquire in school, what skills they acquire in higher education, whether those skills are in sync with the changing needs of the industry. Since you mentioned AI and other, so that is going to be, because Tamil Nadu is actually having 50% of its youth in higher education. It's a remarkable achievement. In fact, the NEP
47
national education policy says that you're going to achieve after that 2030 I think 35 or something. But already it's here 50%. This national average is 27%. It's double of that. But it's good. But the challenge is to make those who go to this higher education acquire skills such that their skills they can deploy that skills or maybe get jobs, employability. So that's actually is the challenge, I would think. These are all new set of challenges, I would think. So it is not to say that the state is not doing. State is doing fantastic in certain sector, but these are the emerging challenges that states should take a proactive cognizance to ensure that it actually puts an intervention both on learning outcomes, even the health sector. Basic things done, but now you need to have a different. So our population demography is changing. We are not our DFR has been falling for a long time. Our population getting aged. We have a different set of needs, elderly needs. So do we have a infrastructure to see this emerging? So we'll have to see all of this case by case, sector by case, sector of the new challenges. So that's where I would think of most important the state should.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Very insightful talking to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay. Yeah.